We are here back on a Thursday for Think and Link, pants optional, though it's cold here in Minnesota, so that's a different option today because it is chilly here. We've got this early fall going on. This is an event we put on every Thursday in which we get together and have a conversation with two leading minds in an industry or a sector. It was inspired by an event we used to have at our office when pants were not optional. And we would have a speaker come in and network and connect, think and link and use our brains and exercise that important organ. So we've adapted to this new environment, and now we put this on in this form and have a nice discussion with these two individuals. We're going to be talking about eSports. We also will probably cover the fact that you don't need to capitalize the S anymore, just so you know. The lesson learned by me, because we like to talk about type and the AP and everything else in these situations. Was an important part of the conversation. But one moment for our sponsors, so everybody knows who puts this on. This is Capsule, Capsule.us, physically located in the North Loop of Minneapolis, but really distributed all over the country. We now just had a staff member move to Colorado. Still on the team, but moving to Denver, Colorado, or has moved, which is kind of part of this new world we're living in. You can work from anywhere. And we are a special projects firm, and we do a lot of work in and around brands, launching brands, giving them a refreshed visual and written language. That's a lot of the stuff we do. And we are extremely curious about eSports. We've all had a little introduction to it in some form. My shocking moment when I heard kids were getting scholarships to go to college for eSports was intriguing to me. It kind of shocked my world. And I said, I got to look at this more. I got to spend more time. And then Ted talked about it in one of our past Think and Link events from the Timberwolves. He had a great little plug-in for talking about eSports. So when this came up as an opportunity to have these two guests participate, Rebecca and Brett are going to talk about their perspectives on this, and of course we couldn't resist to have them here because of how curious we are about this. So I'm going to hand it over to them for them to do their individual introductions, and then Kelly's going to start us off with our first question for our guests. So Rebecca, take it away with your intro.
Hi guys, my name is Rebecca Longawa. I'm the founder of Happy Warrior. It's an esports consultancy firm. So I work with teams, tournament organizers, brands, investors, and startups in the space, and really help them kind of make connections and navigate, as well as put together some deep strategies.
Brett.
Sorry, I had myself double muted there. Brett Diamond, COO of WISE Ventures eSports. So we are an eSports organization based here in the Twin Cities. We operate the Minnesota Rocker in the Call of Duty League, as well as of about a month ago, version 1 in Rocket League Championship Series. So we have 2 esports teams, and I'm sure we'll get into the detail on that, but two teams of professional gamers. We launched about a year ago, and we spent the last year building up our organization. My quick background, took on this role about a year and a half ago, spent 3 years prior to that working with the Minnesota Vikings in their sponsorship group, and prior to that, spent 11 years with the NFL at their head office, working in their events department.
Fantastic. Welcome, Brett and Rebecca. I am super excited because I have had my education, or I'm learning more about esports and gamification. And we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. So I'm going to dive right in, making the assumption that maybe many on the call today don't necessarily know the differences between the two. And just a quick overview. I mean, we've talked about, and Aaron alluded to, esports and competitive gaming. These industries are booming. And Rebecca, we talked about this on Tuesday. Analysts are projecting that the video game sector will generate around 160 billion in revenues this year, and about 1 billion of that for esports specifically, which I thought was interesting. That's nearly double what the global film and music industries will produce combined. So pretty impressive and staggering numbers. But with that, again, it's just the understanding of an overview, just the primary differences between what we say esports and gaming. If you could just give us your perspective on that, and then Brett would love to hear yours as well. Let's start there.
Great. Yeah. So, esports is a subset of the overall gaming industry. So if you think about gaming, it's playing video games, and you can really play them in three ways. You can play them on your phone, like mobile games. You can play them on a console, like an Xbox or a PlayStation, and you can play them on a PC computer. And the types of games that you play really vary based on each of those platforms. There's specific games that are high in strategy that are, most often played on a laptop computer, a PC. Games that are very simple and easy to understand, like Fortnite, are often played in the palm of your hand. And a lot of the action sports type games, like the Madden, the NBA 2K, those are more often played on consoles. So that's gaming. So it really comes from, the creation of these games, the publishing, the distribution, retail activations, and then there's a lot of nuances that kind of layer underneath. So esports is the act of competing, playing video games. And esports itself is about a $1 billion industry right now. And it's absolutely growing. China's leading the way, with the US right behind in terms of not only the dollars generated, but the amount of fans that are engaged in the space. So, that's just like a nuts and bolts, quick little breakdown and a differentiation between the two.
Thank you. And I'd also, so Rebecca, with that, back to, I know Aaron mentioned the capitalization of the S. Is it also true the E? We don't have to capitalize the E unless it's the beginning of a sentence, right? And just thinking about the grammatical application.
Like name, a title. So the AP did weigh in and put together kind of an official use of how you use esports. So there's no dash, no hyphen. All lowercase. Just like how we write email now. I think maybe 15 years ago, everyone was spelling email like big E, little M, right. E dash, E, little E, big M. So it's very similar.
Thank you.
You know what's real when the AP gets involved.
There you go.
Right?
I've got my manual right
and
here.
Interestingly, so there's almost 8 billion people in the world, half of which have access to technology, to a phone or a computer. And of those, half of those are aware of what esports is. So a quarter of the world's population right now knows about esports. They know what esports is, which is really, to me, completely mind-blowing, because it's really just exploded in the mainstream over the past couple of years here in the US.
So, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for that overview. That's helpful. And Aaron, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just for Brett's purposes, I want to follow that up with the fact that you've come from the world of professional sports. Obviously, we talked about your background in the NFL. I'd like to talk to you about, or can you share, what was most appealing to you about making the leap from physical professional sports to the virtual realm? Obviously, we can see that, again, the numbers, revenue projections for this year. But talk a little bit about, on a personal level, what you saw was appealing about making that leap.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, on a personal level, and I'm sure at some point we'll talk about sort of organizational perspective on it, but it was such a unique opportunity to build an organization from the ground up and be a part of something in an emerging space where, I'm someone that, whether I was, early in my career or even now today, have always been someone that's always looking for what's an opportunity to learn something new, to be involved in something that's never been done before. And that was very much what I saw in this opportunity. prior to getting involved in this, I had worked in my role with the Vikings, overseeing their involvement in EA's Madden competitive gaming series. So that was sort of a toe dip in the water of esports for both myself and the Vikings organization. And then as the Wilf family got serious about investing in a team, in an esports team, they tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I was interested in taking this on. And, throughout my career in traditional sports, it was sort of on my professional bucket list to work for an expansion team one day. I can't say I always thought that would be, a competitive gaming organization. But when the opportunity came along, it was just too appealing to pass up. And, starting off as literally the only employee and, build it. We're now up to 20 full-time staff plus players and coaches and growing. We've hired an amazing team of professionals from all different areas, esports, traditional sports, people that come from outside of both areas. And just having a chance to build up an organization, create a brand from nothing, figure out the name, figure out the logo, all of those things, were such unique opportunities that the chance to go down this path was too good to pass up.
That's great. It's fascinating. Very multifaceted. Just even you talking through the composition of your team and staff. It's fascinating. Thank you, Brett.
It reminds me. I've been around long enough to have played, baseball on the Mac 2C or whatever it was when the early Macintosh, right? So it wasn't even anywhere near esports and what we're doing now and the engagement level that's going on. It's really, to be getting into it now is really intriguing. It's almost like the early days of ecom, right? It's got a perception challenge that it's overcoming day by day or hour by hour almost, right? One of the ones that we talked about a little bit was the fact that it's, the audience or the demographics that we perceive, right? We just say the gamer, right? The gamer kid that's in your basement, or the one that I have at home that's sometimes in the basement playing games, that I try to say, don't be a gamer. But then I'm thinking, but you could, and you could make millions if you knew Rebecca and Brent. And tell me about the demographics, Rebecca. I'd love to hear a little bit more so the audience can know really who's doing this, who's engaging, and at what levels.
So gamers, almost everybody that you interact with is a gamer at some level or has been a gamer, right? So it's playing video games. And interestingly, it's almost 50-50 in terms of males and females. And it hits every age demographic, from the young Gen Z population to millennials and boomers. Everybody's kind of gaming. And I think it's interesting because you don't think of, I think a lot of women that I talk to, or, other moms that I talk to, they don't think about themselves as gamers, but women are consuming, half of the amount of time gaming. And it really comes down to those mobile games and, the puzzle games and those. The fans of, the people who are engaging and watching people game on streams, the fans are diverse as well, but really tend higher on the male demographic. Esports fans specifically are, heavily male dominated in terms of who's engaging with esports. And you're really kind of taking a look at that, 18 to 35 age range. But I think it's one thing that is important for marketers to understand is the way that families interact now is very different. And Gen Z, they really are influencing the way that families are making decisions, and parents are really kind of listening to their kids about what's happening in the world and brands they should engage with. So even though you might not be getting the moms themselves consuming this content, the learnings and the brand affinity, that is going to bleed kind of back into your home conversation. So yes, everybody's a gamer, but the esports fans, we're seeing a larger percentage of them males, 18 to 35.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, from our perspective as a team, and a new team at that. It's interesting because the concept of city-based esports teams is relatively new. There's only two leagues that focus on that dynamic, both of which are Activision Blizzard games, Call of Duty League, which we're in with Minnesota Rocker, and Overwatch League. You see a few organizations, Pittsburgh Knights, Kansas City Pioneers are examples where they don't necessarily play in leagues that are city focused, but they've chosen to have that as part of their moniker. But while that audience is predominantly young males, what we believe, and we really look at through two lenses, right? When we think about it long term and where esports can grow and build to, now that we have a city-based team, a team that has Minnesota in their name, we do see that as an opportunity to give people that might not be sure how to engage with esports, and might not be sure how to consume the product, a reason to tune in, a reason to watch. And really, it's not terribly different from how you think about, or how a traditional sports team thinks about things, right? So take the Vikings, for instance. In a non-pandemic world, obviously, US Bank Stadium on any given Sunday, you're going to have a variety of people in the stands. You will have people who are your hardcore football fan, who are sitting in the upper deck because they like the angle, and they're keeping their own stats, and they're not watching the video boards or any of the entertainment. They're just watching football. Then you might have somebody with them that, it's their friend that's along for the ride, or their wife or husband or boyfriend and girlfriend who's there, to participate as well, or somebody that's going with a group of their buddies. So all these different types of people that are consuming traditional sports, and they're going to traditional sports event. In esports, it's largely the same, but there's a higher concentration of those hardcore fans. And as what organizations like ours think a lot about is, how do we make sure that we're continuing to engage those hardcore fans, and then also broaden that base to their friends, and create a great experience where, they're coming to our events, and they're bringing their friend that may have only played the game once or twice, or has never played the game, but is along for the experience of it.
I like that. In that same vein, because you touched on this a little bit, Brett, would love to talk about how brands are engaging in esports, and I'd love both of you to share this, and then we'll pivot to actual revenue streams and talk about how those are developed. But let's start with, how are brands engaging? What roles can they play? Rebecca, if you want to start with that, and then we'll.
Yeah. There's two segments that get talked about a lot within our industry, that some terms you may have heard: non-endemic brands and endemic brands. And the difference between the two: an endemic brand is a brand that is already monetizing and invested in the space, like the consoles or controllers, the types of hardware and software that is innate to the space. Non-endemic brands are brands that you and I interact with every single day. They're clients that we've worked with for many years that want to utilize esports and gaming as a whole to really tap into this unique audience, in order to have, brand awareness and brand affinity. Mm-hmm. And what's different about this audience is the majority of them, they're consuming content in a completely different way. So if a brand that's a consumer brand, or even a service brand, want to really get in front of this audience, this is a really great way. They're meeting them where they already are. These are digitally native folks that are, plugged in. And esports is the biggest thing to understand about esports is it's a community. Twitch is extremely popular for streaming, and they've kind of been able to hold on to the lion's share because of the community that's built in there. So brands that understand how to tap into different types of communities, they're really going to win in this space. And, we talked on Tuesday a little bit about, this is really, at the end of the day, a digital marketing strategy right now, especially with COVID. And, Brett talked about the live event aspect, and now that's kind of on a shelf. But this is a digital marketing strategy, and there's a lot of ways for brands to get in front of this audience using digital tactics, probably just platforms that they're not used to using all the time, like Twitch or Discord or Reddit, you know, getting yourself involved and being a part of the conversation, more active on Twitter, the types of, you know, places that these people are already having discussions and talking about things. And then doing it in an authentic way, I think is really important. And Brett can speak to some of the partnerships that they've had success with.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, for us, especially when we're talking with the non-endemic brands, in a lot of cases, it's helpful to frame it up in a similar way in a comparison to traditional sports. And at its core, a lot of the ways that a brand engages are conceptually similar, right? There's, you know, somebody who may not be familiar with the space might be intimidated by the idea of like, how do I get my brand involved in a Twitch stream? But at its core, the steps are very similar to a TV broadcast or any sort of live event, right? You've got placements of the brand within the broadcast. You've got product placements. Well, if this mug was, you know, a Caribou coffee mug, for example, right? You know, like you can do all of those things. And in some cases, the personalities involved, you know, to Rebecca's point, are powerful brand ambassadors, even more so than a traditional sports athlete. You know, so we're in the midst of free agency for Rocker, our Call of Duty League team, and the roster of guys that we're targeting signing, if we get the players we want, their social media followers for our 4 starters would be in excess of 1 million. Like most of them, I haven't done the comparison, but I think the top guy in terms of social media followers would have more than the top Vikings player, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like their followings are that significant. You know, when particularly with city-based teams, you know, live events, again, obviously in the non-COVID world, are a big part of that model. And again, it's less about, you know, taking a draft, like just something that you would never recognize. Like if you spent an hour like walking through point by point the things that a brand does in the esports space, each one of them has some sort of a parallel to other areas of traditional sports marketing, etc. It's just like anything else that's trying to reach a younger audience. It's going to be different and nuanced to reflect that audience. And to Rebecca's point, you know, where that audience is and where they're consuming content. In some ways, this sounds overly simplistic, but it's really no different than, like, honestly, in the early days of TV, where, you know, there were probably brands, you know, far long before my time, but there were probably brands trying to figure out how to pivot from radio to TV. Like that's the era that we're in, and the era that we'll probably be in for a while to come, just with how fast the space evolves.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of color to some of these non-endemic brands, naturally we think about things that we make broad assumptions on, right? Like the Mountain Dews and the chips and the things like that. But, you know, data's really shown that gamers are pretty healthy and they prefer to drink water and they want to have healthy food, and protein is important. But, you know, that aside, some of the biggest brands that are in this space that I think you wouldn't expect to see: Geico, State Farm, DHL, very heavy in the space on the service side, Louis Vuitton, Gucci for high-end luxury brands, Herman Miller, which is a furniture company, is just partnered with Logitech to design just the most beautiful ergonomic gaming chair. So there's a lot, you know, Zenni Optical is in the space. They have multiple partnerships with many teams with their blocks, their blue blocking glasses. So, you know, I have people reaching out to me on LinkedIn that are chiropractors and they're looking to get into esports, sports psychologists looking to broaden their services and asking for insights on the esports industry. So, you know, there's a lot of really powerful big name brands that we're interacting with every day that see that this is a viable space. And there's a lot of really great case studies that show like how powerful having an affinity. DHL, for example, is a really cool case study. If anybody wants to Google DHL and eSports, they did an in-game activation where they were using this little DHL cart to deliver tools in the game to you. And then when that game had its championships, DHL was there, and they were handing out prizes in the same type of little cart with a real guy, driving around in the actual arena and giving things out. But when DHL came up on the screen, the entire arena, and these are arenas, these are like the same type of an arena with 10,000 fans, 12,000 fans in it, everybody started chanting DHL. I mean, who would think that these esports fans would be chanting DHL, DHL? I mean, it's really, really powerful. Brands that get in early, compared to traditional sports, esports fans are more likely to remember the brand that is in the space and more likely to purchase from that brand than a traditional sports fan. So it is a really captive, hyper sophisticated audience.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Rebecca made a great point about we think about some things that sort of go against the misconceptions around gamers. So we're working on a partnership right now with a brand that would focus on the healthy living aspects of our players. And we're in the middle of a roster turnover, but I expect this to be true of our new guys as well. But the roster we had last season, this was a group of players who worked out, eat right, they'd all go to the gym together pre-COVID. They take care of themselves. They'd eat, I would say as healthy as a 22, 23-year-old generally would. But those are powerful stories to tell. And there's perceptions out there of gamers take Adderall or this or that, and those things can be combated if you do a partnership with a company that has natural alternatives to those things. And so there's a lot of room to play in those spaces as well, where you're if a brand finds a way to genuinely support the players and the organization, that tells a powerful story. And in general, esports fans, it's very similar. Again, to make another traditional sports comparison, NASCAR fans are particularly well known for supporting the brands that support the drivers, right? Because it's genuinely viewed. I would say esports is very similar, where fans genuinely look at sponsors of teams and sponsors of individual players as somebody that's supporting them on a level that then the fan wants to reciprocate. And I think that's more so than traditional sports, where, that doesn't happen as often. I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. No, great points. That's interesting.
We have some really great questions in chat. I'm wondering if we
I know.
I was just looking at that.
I was just going to turn to that. Yeah. Because Demian had a wonderful question about the revenue streams. And I do want to get to numbers, because I think it would be good for people to hear real numbers. And one of his questions was, are the platforms capturing the lion's share? And my curious question is, like, if I wanted to buy a billboard on Rainbow Road inside of Mario Kart, what would it cost me? No, for a Capsule, right? So, because Capsule is obviously one of those non-endemic, right? Brands that would not be involved. Curious about that, and curious about, what are the platforms getting the lion's share? Where's the revenue going? Who's getting
the revenue is really coming primarily from sponsorship revenue is number one, with media rights behind that. Mm-hmm. And then everything else are these other, these little slivers. The live event, like the ticket sales, that aspect, that's only 8% of that entire $1 billion. So, which is really interesting, because this has proven to be COVID proof, right? Esports is actually on the rise. Gaming sales, console sales, like all of that's kind of been overall on the rise. And when surveyed amongst every age demographic from Gen Z all the way up to baby boomers, it was number 4 in terms of the thing that people were doing more of. Playing video games came in at number 4 since COVID. So there's growth. But the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because only 8% of the revenue was coming from those ticket sales and things of that nature. The industry's really stayed pretty strong with COVID. Mm-hmm. And traditional sports teams are learning, which brings it to Brianne's question. The traditional sports teams are kind of taking a look at what is working within this industry, being digitally native, that they can kind of learn from and lean in on. And, sports fans traditionally, that market has kind of waned. There's like a lot of issues with MLB and filling stadiums. So how do you build community of fans? And that's what makes our fans really unique, because they're always online and they're able to connect with each other in like our Discord, which is a private server that we have. They're connecting with each other. They're building relationships with one another. And if something is happening industry-wide or with our team, they're instantly talking about it. It's a little bit harder to do. Twitter kind of solves it in the traditional sports sense, but nothing really compares to the tight communities that are built here, which is really exciting, I think, because when you have that type of a captive audience, it's risk reward, right? So the risk is you make them mad, they're gonna talk about it, and everybody's gonna know that they're upset with you. Not everybody was super pleased that we. I consult with Brett and his team at Rocker, so I always say we, when we got passed on our options of all of our players, that didn't go over super well with everybody, right? Because we have built this amazing community. But I think they're going to be really excited when they find out what the rebuild is going to look like. I think that it will be forgiven, but it's a really great environment for building a strong community and building that brand affinity around that community as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to the question of, what can traditional sports learn from esports? The answer is an enormous amount. And when we were coming into this a year ago, we were very intentional to not enter it with a mentality that we had all the answers for the esports space, because we'd had some success in traditional sports, whether it was, at the ownership level with the Will family, and I kind of skipped over that part, but the Will family, who owns the Vikings, owns our organization as well. And Gary Vaynerchuk is a minority investor and is very active in our marketing and social media strategies. But to my point, we didn't come into it thinking that we had all the answers, right? It was extremely important for us to spend most of the first year, and even now, listening, learning. We spent, almost all we did for 3 months was meet with people in the esports space, and we were just sponges, just soaking up the knowledge. And we were fortunate to hire some really, really smart, talented people with esports backgrounds. And I mentioned earlier that we have staff that come from esports, come from traditional sports, and bring in outside perspectives as well. But that's really been our philosophy, is find that right balance, and then everybody checks their ego at the door, whether you're an intern or you got a C in your title or anything in between, because there are no right answers. There's some things that have worked well. Let's watch the space and figure out what makes sense, that other esports organizations are doing. Where it makes sense to layer in something from traditional sports, we'll do that. But a lot of it is finding a third door that blends all of it. And that's really the philosophy that we have on a daily basis. And to expand too on Rebecca's point that, so we released our roster from the first season of Call of Duty League just ended. And it's very interesting because, when I worked in traditional sports, there was a lot of conversation around, we need to figure out how to connect on a one-on-one level with fans. And that's something that all traditional sports teams are trying to figure out or are talking about. That's something that esports teams are truly already doing. And so, I mean, frankly, I'm having so much fun in this job. I don't think I'm ever going to go back to traditional sports, but if I were to suddenly find myself in that world tomorrow, I mean, there's an enormous amount that we've learned over the past year of just how to truly engage on a personal level with fans, that traditional sports teams aren't, it's not even on the radar in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. If we can talk a little bit more about that attachment between team, brand, and your audience. And I see this question from Nancy, and in that same vein. So when you think about in esports, what will resonate, what will create that connection between fans? What are you seeing, league, player, team, a mark? I mean, we think about traditional sports and people attach themselves to a mascot, right? Or they attach themselves to a visual identity or a color scheme that's associated with a team. What are you seeing? And then, of course, how does that apply to licensing, which, Nancy, great question. You could share.
Yeah. So big picture, the answer is going to vary for every fan, right? If we asked everybody, every participant on this call, why they support well, not necessarily local, but any sports team that you support, we'd probably get a lot of different answers, right? And so we try to create a way to engage with fans across a variety of motivations. But for us, it really starts with accessibility and transparency. Mm-hmm. And one of the foundational elements of our marketing and social media strategy, and it even goes beyond that, it's truly part of our identity, is that every fan that comments and replies to us on social media gets a response. I can't say we're always, at 100% on that, but we're close, and our social media team understands that that's the expectation. Mm-hmm. And that was something, frankly, when I was the only employee, something that I personally prioritized was, in the early days that, we announced that that there was going to be a Minnesota Call of Duty League team. It didn't have a name. Nobody knew anything about it, but there were people engaging with us on social media. And, there were a lot of things that we had on our to-do list at that point. But in my view, if somebody cared enough about the fact that this team was here in Minnesota to comment or tweet at us, that person deserved a response. Mm-hmm. And that was put as high a priority as any, big picture strategy or any of our long-term planning. It was, okay, now I'm going to spend 2 hours responding to people on social media. Mm-hmm. Now, I will freely admit that me handling all of our social media was not a sustainable social media strategy. So fortunately, we quickly hired some really good people to handle that. But that philosophy is still core to what we do. And so, for example, earlier this week, we did a live stream on YouTube where we talked about the moves that we'd made in free agency, or the release of our previous roster. We had our coaches on to talk about why. We took questions from the fans, and really it's just about having an open, transparent dialogue with all of our fans, whether there's 1,000 or 50,000 or 5 million.
That's great. A great philosophy. Right. Yes. Rebecca, it looks like you had something to follow up with on that. Anything to add?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I addressed Julie's question about women in gaming and esports, and just acknowledge that, which, it's true. There's historically, it's tough space. It's a tough space for girls. So, and you really get two completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how women are reacting. So female streamers, the most popular female streamers, they really kind of lean into their sexuality, and whether it's good or bad, that's kind of what's happening in that space. The most popular ones are very beautiful, and they're getting, endorsement deals with beauty brands and makeup brands, and they have a high number of male followers. They try to hide relationship status because there's backlash if it's found out they have a boyfriend. I mean, it's just this really kind of odd thing. On the esports side, where we focus a lot is female gamers really try to kind of hide the fact that they're female a lot of times when they're competing. It can be a really toxic environment when you get kicked out of a lobby because the people in your lobby find out that you're a female, or you get ganged up on and killed on purpose. It is an issue, but I will say industry-wide and even globally industry-wide, I just spoke on a panel about this in London a couple of weeks ago for the Esports Leadership Summit, really addressing that, the industry understands that there's an issue in terms of diversity and inclusion, and there's a lot of planning and steps being taken. Collegiate Star League just announced they're doing, they're one of the largest tournament organizers. They just announced they're doing a women's league. They're also doing an HBCU, Historic Black College and University League, to really make sure that it's a safe place and it's accessible for all people. So yeah, and even organizationally, I mean, we've got news coming soon on what we're going to be doing as an organization to create space and opportunities for women in gaming as well. So organizationally, it's something that we're paying attention to and having conversations about and looking for ways to really lean in there. So I just want to make sure that we commented on that, because it isn't the best light that we've had, historically in the industry in terms of how we treat women, but there's definitely awareness there and some impactful steps being made to change that.
That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that, Rebecca. Thanks for that question. Aaron, did you have a follow-up?
I think Brett was just going to add another comment in, otherwise I do.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, and I'll add to it, for us as an organization, we want to create a safe space for everyone to engage with Minnesota Rocker and now version 1. And it's not just about, there's obviously some very important issues that we're talking about here, but in general, we want everything we do to feel like everybody is welcome, right? Regardless of your gender, regardless of your background, regardless of how well you know the game. Some of the things that I think we talk about a lot are creating an environment where people that aren't familiar with the game can feel comfortable coming to engage with our events or engage with our streams. And by its very nature, because we're trying to create that environment, I think we hope that it creates a safe space for everybody. But internally, our staff is pretty much, I think, an even split between male and female. We had a staff tournament recently, and the winning team, one of the women on our team won our staff event. I think probably the 3 or 4 best players that aren't, that not our pro players, but our staff are all women. So, it's something that, like Rebecca said, we're going to have an initiative that we're going to announce soon, that we're excited about. But even from just purely a business perspective, if you're an organization that is not welcoming to everybody, you're cutting off your potential customers. And that just doesn't strike me as a smart way to do business. So we're hopeful that, that by doing things the right way, we can create an environment that attracts all types of fans.
It's great to hear. Inclusive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially if you have an audience a female audience that does a lot of the discretionary spending. Obviously, these brands will not show up if the spenders are not going to be there. So you definitely have to cater to. But I can see it can be a long road because it does skew male and or has in the past. I'm curious more about numbers and specifically about streamers. Rebecca, you talked about that in our pre-call, and distinguishing what are streamers versus, and I don't remember the other term for the other maybe traditional gamer or someone that's a sponsored gamer.
Yeah.
The differences between that and just some of the numbers so people can determine, okay, maybe I actually should shove my kid down into the basement, have them play more games, and keep them down there, lock them in there, and just let them just always be gaming, and what that can mean as far as a future income stream for them, because they're going to be taking care of us. So,
Yeah.
let them earn if they could.
There's a multitude of ways that if you wanted a career in the gaming industry, you could really forge a great path, right? And it is everything from game design and development to sound engineering and music that's in game to being, on the event side, sound, stage, and lighting. A lot of the best sound, stage, and lighting guys out there are really aging out, and I would suspect that a lot are going to retire. I mean, usually when I'm on like a large production overall, it's a lot of guys in their 60s that have been, really honing that craft for a long time. So there's a ton of space there in the esports industry. Obviously coding and engineering and all of those things kind of come into factor here. But when it comes to being that personality, when it comes to being a star, there's streamers, and that's people that are, playing video games and doing other things. Actually, Bob Ross is a streamer. Bob Ross now has over 1 million followers on his Twitch channel. And if you don't know who Bob Ross is, he's the curly-haired painter from Channel 2 when you were a little kid.
Seriously?
So you're getting a lot
that
of
Bob
people
Ross
leveraging these platforms in really unique ways to drive fan engagement and to monetize. But streamers primarily, and Twitch streamers primarily, are playing video games live on the stream. You can see the game is the big part of the screen, and their face is like a little square, and they're interacting. There's a chat box, just very similar layout to what we're all looking at right here. There's a little chat box. Their fans are engaging with them. They might see a comment and they might call somebody out by name, and that is super exciting for their fans to engage with. Streamers, some streamers also are pro gamers, but the majority of them are just streamers. And people like watching streamers, just like I used to like watching my brother play Mario Brothers when I was a kid, because I'd learn something new. But also the whole neighborhood would come and watch my brother play Mario Brothers. He was really good at it, right? So it was like also like our sense of community. It's like something we all enjoy doing together and competing against one another. So that's what a streamer is. And streamers are known to have really high engaging personalities. They're engaging for hours at a time, often 6-7 hours a day, engaging live with their fans. And because of that sense of community, they're getting sponsorship deals. Their fans are subscribing. There's the ability to have unique content, unique merch and off that you only get those offerings if you're a subscriber. So you pay to subscribe. The platform, they pay you for how many people are there because they're able to monetize through their ads and whatnot. And even fans that are following you can tip you if you're on Twitch. They can send you a little bit, which could be, it could be just like Venmoing somebody $1 and saying thank you for something, or Venmoing somebody a coffee. It's kind of like that thing. Like, I appreciate what you're doing. You're cool. Here's some little bit of money. Streamers are the new influencers. They already are. And I think I mentioned Ninja. So Ninja is the top streamer. I think he's a household name. He's very mainstream. He has more followers on his social media than Steph Curry. He is extremely engaging and popular. He has his second Adidas shoe just came out. He's on the face of Red Bull cans. He's considered kind of brand safe. He's got blue hair. He's just this skinny, fun. He's married. He's got like just a total open book in terms of what his daily life looks like. So people really resonate there. Gamers, pro gamers, like the players who play for Rocker and V1, they've been playing really, really competitively. They're hyper focused on being the best at the game. They're not focused on being the biggest personality. They're focused on being the best at their game. Some of them don't have great personalities. Like, some of them are kind of boring. Like you wouldn't, they're, you know, a little bit more introverted. They're just hyper focused. So they're not engaging in the same ways. So the dollars aren't usually as high for them. So whereas Ninja is making what, like, I think $44 million a year. The way we calculate gamers in the pro side is their lifetime earnings, because they usually start in these smaller tournaments where they're, you know, getting anywhere from $2,000 to $20,000 for each tournament. So we look at the lifetime value, and some of the top gamers are making, you know, upwards of a couple million dollars in their lifetime. And each year the numbers kind of seem to grow, just like traditional sports, where the top players are making anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 a season for each respective game. But it's really, you can't compare things completely, because there's a lot of different competitive games, right? So you can be a pro eSports player and not make a lot of money because the game you play might not be a Call of Duty game, right? It might not be the most popular. It's like if you liken it to the Olympics, some Olympic athletes, the top the top athletes like Gabby Douglas, she's making a ton of money, right? She's on a really popular sport. She's very brandable, marketable. Brands are gravitating to her. But there's a lot of other athletes that maybe they play that thing where you ski and then you shoot stuff. Like, I don't think those guys are making a whole lot of money. I don't know what that Olympic sport is, but you know what I'm talking about?
Biathlon?
Biathlon, yeah.
Biathlon?
Skeet shooting and...
Yeah, you combine the two anyway.
So I don't think those
valid points.
Brand deals. I don't even know what the name of the sport is, but I know it's a sport in the Olympics. So it's a complex structure. Like this is a complex structure. When you're working directly with a team, you do have the ability then to piggyback some of those influencers, and the top organizations, most successful organizations in our industry, are really focused on diversification. So they're having multiple games underneath the umbrella and multiple talent. So, streamers, they're signing streamers, they're signing personalities like hosts, they're signing multiple vertical of games underneath that umbrella, because if one game wanes in popularity, then the others can kind of fill the void. And I'm sure with the time we have left, Brett can speak a lot about the growth strategy of WISE Esports as a whole, and really what the future looks like for them.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, what Rebecca just said as well about the importance of understanding or evaluating, because understanding it is really the ultimate game, of which titles will rise and fall is really important. And there were a couple questions in the chat earlier on licensing, and Aaron, your question on, okay, I want to put my ad in Mario Kart, all of that, just sort of taking, zooming out to the 30,000 foot view. I mean, it's about control of the IP at the end of the day. And that's why when you do hear people talk about esports as the Wild West, I had heard that a lot before I was directly involved in it. And, there are some elements where that's sort of true in a lot of areas where it's not. But it really, that question of who controls what IP is really at the foundation of any business that's based on licensing, which the content businesses, the sponsorship businesses, the merchandise businesses. So it's a really interesting dynamic where, for example, we're in 2 leagues right now. Call of Duty League, which is an Activision Blizzard, is the game publisher, and Rocket League is our second one, and Psyonix is that game publisher, and they have drastically different approaches to what we as an organization can monetize and can do from a business and a sponsorship perspective, where interestingly, so we are paying a significant multi-million-dollar franchise fee to be a part of the Call of Duty League. And that is a very long-term commitment. With Rocket League, we are not doing those things, or we're not required to do those things. We simply signed a roster of players, and now we're in Rocket League. Short term, the monetization opportunities are very similar, but the way we look at them, one of them, we hope that they're both long-term investments, right? Clearly, but one of them, we are, like with Call of Duty League, we are tied to that for a very long time. That is an investment looking, not just years, but decades into the future. Rocket League, we feel like, has that potential, but because of the dynamics that the game publisher has chosen to put around the game, we're, as an organization, the barrier to entry is relatively low. Now, organizationally, for us, what we focused on the last year was establishing Minnesota Rocker, building the organization. I talked about building the staff was extremely important, which then, once we have those pieces in place, allows us to grow and expand into a lot of the other areas that Rebecca was talking about. So WISE Ventures eSports is our parent company. That will be rebranded at some point in the next 6 to 9 months into something else that will be a more consumer-facing brand. Our intention has always been to expand into other titles, other games. We're a little more cautious about that expansion, given the world we find ourselves living in. But it's still important, and it's part of our long-term growth plans. We entered Rocket League a month ago, right? We're not necessarily slowing down just because we're in a, we're more cautious, but we're not necessarily hitting pause on things. But for us as an organization, we're looking at things as a combination of, we literally had a discussion amongst our ownership group, last month about looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And then yesterday, and Rebecca was part of this discussion, we had a conversation about our merchandise strategy, where we need to be thinking about, okay, what does that merchandise strategy look like when we relaunch our parent brand, in sometime in 21? What does it look like in the interim between now and then? And then also at a very micro level, we don't have enough merch options right now for version 1. Like, we need more variety and better options. So, let's go find a hoodie that we can put the version 1 logo on and get it on a website ASAP. So it's a combination of very, very long-term strategic thinking, and then, but not letting that get in the way of, okay, we need to do these 5 things this week to make sure that we keep growing and building as an organization. And we've seen some really positive signs where we're in a 12-team league with Call of Duty League. Minnesota Rocker, to me, in traditional sports, merchandise sales is not just about revenue. It's also about relevancy and brand recognition. Mm-hmm. And Minnesota Rocker was 4th in our league in merchandise sales, behind only the 3 ahead of us were iconic brands in the esports space or associated with iconic figures in the space. So for us, that was a really encouraging sign that we have a brand that's being recognized and is resonating with the audience. And interestingly, that sales breakdown was 40% from the Twin Cities, 12% from the rest of the state of Minnesota and the surrounding states, and then 48% from the rest of the country and international. So that tells us that we're creating a foundation that's strong locally, as well as that potential for a national fan base. So those are signs that we're excited about, but at the same time, we're a very new, young organization, and we have to keep focusing on, we have a saying in our organization that we're building the fan base one fan at a time. And that's what drives us. It's responding to fans on social media, making sure they have good merchandise to buy, and not letting where we need to be, 9 months or a year from now get in the way of just the very important next steps that we need to take on things.